I've written and shared some of my experiences in here of what happened to my family and I by me playing with an Ouija board when I was only 8 years old. Who would have ever thought that by simply going through the motions of playing with a simple parlor game could be the cause of what defines as a true haunting that had lasted for 58 years and affected 3 generations. The activity began in ways that could always be easily explained away. The lights would be on and you were certain to have turned them off, likewise with the water faucets. One afternoon, my mum and I had returned from grocery shopping to find the bathtub faucet on full blast and so hot that the steam was coming up from underneath the bathroom door. However, the bathtub hadn't been used for many years. That had resulted in the faucets being frozen. Things would go missing only to find them in odd places. Who puts their jewelry inside of a bowl of peeled hard-boiled eggs into a refrigerator? Not I, but there they were. Like I've said, odd places. Where do the missing things go after they disappear? Then this started to happen more and more often. One time I had intended to eat an apple. I put it down on the counter, but when I went back to pick it up, it was gone. 3 months later, it was frozen solid and in the freezer. One evening after returning home from a wedding and at a townhouse where I'd lived with my then husband, we both had eaten a small cantaloupe cut in half. When we were done eating it, we placed all of the 4 eaten cantaloupe halves by the sink. We fed our dog a can of dog food and went to bed. The next morning we woke up to all 4 cantaloupe halves lined up in a straight line and in the middle of the kitchen floor. The dining table had been pushed hard against the back glass door, and the empty dog food can was found shoved so hard and deep into the garbage disposal. My husband had to take out and replace the entire garbage disposal because he couldn't pry the can out of it. There are so many experiences that I've had, and even more by other people. Activity would have happened during the day, sometimes at night. It never mattered whether you were alone or if there were a lot of people around. No rhyme, no reason. My advice to anyone who is considering playing with an Ouija board would be to don't play. Don't play with something that you know nothing about, because the consequences could follow you and affect others. Believe me, it's not fun to hear your name called out or have something or someone sit on your bed. It can be unnerving to get 3 knocks on the front door to discover no one there, and then you realize the 3 knocks are low on the door. Whoever or whatever knocked was no taller than 3 feet tall. Given the time, those same 3 knocks are now scratches. No matter whether knocks or scratches, the advice remains the same. Do not open the door. And mirrors, all of them everywhere. I wish just that they would stop walking by.
It wasn't me, but this happened to my cousins. Because they didn't think the Ouija board was creepy enough, one afternoon they took the board to a small abandoned warehouse. There were 3 teenagers, 1 friend, plus my cousins, Tim and his sister Bianca. They pulled out the Ouija board and started asking questions. I don't know what they asked, but to their surprise, the pointer piece started moving around quite strongly. Being as skeptical as any cliched character in a horror movie, the boys laughed it off and said, "Come on, which one of you dumbasses is moving it?" Everyone let go of the pointer piece, and it still kept moving. You think that's the scary part? Oh no. The creepiest and scary part is what happened after Bianca started asking, "Who is it? Who's there? Who's moving this thing?" The entire party said they experienced the same thing. A demonic voice emerging out of nowhere and repeating, "Bianca, Bianca, fuck you." They all watched in terror as the pointer flew off the Ouija board by itself. That plus the voice continuing to chant, "I'll kill you," was enough to send two cocky teenage boys and Bianca running. That day, they came back telling me the story, visibly shaken. They claimed they've never felt more terrified and that they made sure no one was at the location before playing with the board. I remember Tim's face getting pale as Bianca described the incident. Were they just telling a tall tale to their younger cousin? Who knows? One thing's for sure, they never played with that Ouija board again.
This didn't happen to me, but it is a story my mum has told me a few times about her and her older sister and a couple of friends that used one. They lived out on a farm, and this farm was surrounded by other farmers' lands. One night when my mum and her sister and her friends decided they would use a Ouija board to see what would happen, they all sat down and thought it would be funny to call in Elvis. Once they did, it said yes, and a glass smashed in the room. They all freaked out and the board spelt "David will die." They immediately stopped playing and left that. The friends left and they were scared. They have a brother named David, so they sat up all night scared and sad, but too scared to tell their mum, my grandmother. The next day they had heard from a neighboring farm that a young boy had rolled a tractor while he was on it and it took his life. They later learnt that this boy's name was David. My mum still to this day says that this happened, but up to you to believe it or not. So, I myself have never touched an Ouija board, and I don't think I ever will. When I was in my early 20s and newly divorced with a 1.5-year-old daughter, I moved into an apartment that was strange right from the start. Although newly painted, in one of the bedrooms was an upside-down cross on the wall that kept coming back. When I left, the curtains would move back as though something was watching me leave. My friend, I'll call her Terry, was pregnant at the time and showed up one day with an Ouija board saying, "Come on, we're gonna find out if there's ghosts in here." I told her no way. It continued on for a while back and forth, but it fell on deaf ears in the end. Before we were able to start our little Ouija session, someone turned up and we had to wait for them to leave. By that time it was around 3 o'clock in the morning. Terry asked me to come on, said to me that we should try this. She pulled it out and we were laughing and joking and carrying on. We asked our first question: is this apartment haunted? Boom, it worked right off the bat. In fact, I thought she moved it and she thought I had done it. It answered all the questions we asked, and it told us it was Terry's brother who had passed and he was here to keep me safe. It told us that Terry was having a girl, correct, and it totally made us drawn to it. At exactly 6 a.m. in the morning, it stopped working. We were a bit bummed, but we put it under my bed and couldn't wait to use it again later. Maybe an hour or so later, I was talking to a friend on the phone telling her about it. She tripped out and said, "Where is it now?" When I told her it was under my bed, she screamed and told me to get out of the apartment. She told me that she'd call me back. Her aunt was a medium and she called back and we made arrangements for her to come and cleanse the place, which she did. What happened was whatever was possessing the board was luring us and setting us up for possible possession. Putting the Ouija board under my bed was the worst possible place that I could have put it in the entire apartment. I will be honest, after this I have never used one again. It was in the late 70s, and my best friend and I decided to try an Ouija board that happened to be among the things that her mother's father had left behind when he passed. This man was not a very nice man in life. My friend, I'll call her Joan, told me all the things her mother told her about him. He had basically made his children's and his wife's lives hell on earth, and Joan's mother married in order to escape it. When Joan told me about the Ouija board, my interest was instantly piqued. "You want to try it?" she asked over the phone. "Yes," I replied. "I'll be right over." At the time, I didn't have a driver's license. We lived in a tiny town of around 700 people, and setting out on foot to her house was no big deal, even though it was across town. I was so eager to get started on the Ouija board, I made it there in record time. Once I was at her house and she had ushered me in, she carefully pulled the box that held the Ouija board down from the closet in the mudroom. I followed her into the room where we began our session with this relic that, to us, was steeped in delicious mystery and, even better yet, completely forbidden. Not only were we flaunting our rebellion by disobeying our parents, but we were stepping over a threshold into a dark, supernatural abyss. Joan took the board out of the box and placed it on a low platform on the floor, and I took my place on one side and she the other. We each took a breath, in unison as our eyes met across the minuscule distance. Neither of us had even the smallest flicker of hesitation or doubt. "Let's do this," we announced to each other in a sort of telepathic silence. "What do we ask?" I said. We hadn't even considered that. A brief moment of silence as we pondered, and then Joan indicated that we placed our hands on the planchette, and we did so with a natural reverence for things unknown. Joan cleared her throat. "Where are you from?" she called out. At first, there was nothing. We frowned at each other. She repeated her question. This time the planchette moved, seeming to guide across the board on its own accord. We glanced at each other with knitted brow, suddenly questioning the honesty of the other. "Are you doing that?" Joan asked. "No," I came back at her, irritated. The evening was slipping across the room in deep shadow. The sound of the planchette as it made its way to a single letter was almost silken. Then it stopped. We made note of the letter as it quickly made its way to another. Here, it finally spelled out. I felt a chill. Joan was not convinced. She was sure I was driving the pancetta. I felt indignant. "Ask it something else," Joan almost demanded. I bit my lip and studied the board. In all of my 15 years on Earth, this was becoming as close to a scary movie as I could get. I had to make it good. "Are you attached to me or Joan?" I asked, grinning. Joan gasped, eyes wide. We grew quiet, leaned over the board, and placed our hands ever so gently again on the planchette. And it spelled out my name. This time I became the incredulous one. "Stop it," I growled at her. "It's not me," she protested. We had a lit candle, and only the soft amber light of a small lamp on her bedside table accompanied its tiny flame. The evening had deepened. We stared at each other across the Ouija board. I made note of her facial features in the shadow. Now adding to what I began to feel was the unfolding of our personal horror movie. Innocently enough, we pressed on. "How long have you been with her?" Joan asked. I felt my heart thump against my ribs. I wasn't sure I wanted to know, but I also wasn't sure if Joan was pulling my leg. I knew absolutely that I wasn't the one guiding the planchette, so it had to be her. This time the planchette spelled out, "Since you are 8, as if it were talking to me. "This isn't funny," I stated, and Joan insisted she wasn't the one spelling everything out. She was as deeply convinced that it was me. "Ask it something else," she practically demanded. I knew what I wanted to know, so I said it out loud. "What do you want from me?" The planchette paused. We had our hands light on it, waiting. It made a couple of false starts, but then began its confident trek across the board to spell out the answer. When its answer became evident, we were both horrified. "I want to fuck you," was its reply. I got angry and released the planchette and sat back away from the Ouija board and glared at Joan, but the look on her face was equally angry and disgusted. "Oh, stop it," she shouted at me again. "That's not even funny." "I didn't do it," I defended. And then, just like that, the candle blew out. It was as though someone put their lips close to the flame and blew, complete with the sound of the softly forced air passing between them. We gasped in unison. The room was dark, but not completely. Now the ember glow of the lamp was alone in providing illumination to the room. Joan and I stared at each other wide-eyed in disbelief. We knew this was an impossible feat, yet there it was, remaining staunchly inexplicable and frightening. I felt the hair along the back of my neck stand up straight. My heart was pounding. I wanted to leap into Joan's arms for comfort, but neither of us wanted to move. And now, just as we began to come back to our senses, the candle, just like that, relit. It relit all by itself, on its own accord, with no one near it to do so. We both backed away from the Ouija board and the candle, and then leaped into each other's arms, hugging each other closely, eyes riveted on that glowing candle, its flame calmly dancing gently with the unseen air movements in the room. This was no trick candle. This was an ordinary pillar candle that she had taken from the dining room to use for this. To this day, I don't know how that could have happened. We decided to put the Ouija board away for good, but strange things began to happen in her home that didn't stop until she took the board out of the house and into the garbage can out the back. Back then, we could still burn our trash in the metal garbage cans, and that's what they did with the Ouija board in theirs. Only then did all the paranormal things cease for her. I have never felt that there was anything to what it had said about being with me since I was 8, so I have no idea what that meant. However, I have always been sensitive to the emotions of others. I have always had prophetic dreams and have seen unexplainable things that I really don't want to get into here. Regardless of that, I can't explain what was meant by that message, nor can I explain the candle. Kia ora kahoa. Grim here. And that was a collection of 5 terrifying Ouija experiences featuring the amazing Dark Somnium. I have to thank you so much for joining me in this one, as it is such an honor to work with him in any way. I haven't said this very much, to be honest. I say it all the time. Dark Somnium is one of the narrators next to Mr. Creepypasta, who literally inspired me to try this, and he has been so generous and kind and just so willing to join in and help out with these collaborations, and I feel so blessed. This is like a dream come true. I feel like I'm gonna keep dragging this out if I keep it going, so I will try to pull back my fandom, but thank you, Dark Somnium, for even just lending your voice for 1 minute. It has meant so much. As for everyone else who's listened, if you enjoyed these stories and you would like to hear more, please like and subscribe. Jumping onto the channel like that helps so much. One thing that could be also helpful for me, I won't beg, but try to watch some of my older videos. Give me some viewermanship, because I'm desperate. No, I'm kidding. But thank you all for coming along and listening and jumping on. I cannot express how happy I am, how emotional it makes me knowing that all of you guys are here with me. Don't worry, I'm not going to cry. I try my best not to do that on these things. Okay, I've carried this on for too long. Usual thing. Be safe wherever you are. Have an amazing day or night. And this is Grim, and I'm, well, signing off.